Welcome to Bridging the Gap, the podcast where we connect families, educators, and advocates to empower neurodiverse children. I'm your host, Kaela Westman, special education advocate and founder of the Bridge Coaching Services. As a passionate advocate and dedicated coach, I've seen firsthand the transformative power of collaboration and support. Together, we'll explore the latest insights, strategies, and stories from the world of special education, all aimed at bridging the gap between families, schools, and communities. Today, we are going to demystify special education jargon. If you have ever found yourself sitting in a meeting, hearing acronyms that sound like somebody picked them out of alphabet soup, or you're reading through your kiddos' paperwork and you're thinking, what do all of these terms even mean? Acronyms, legal terms, and specialized language can really make special education feel like a foreign language. But our goal by the end of this episode is that you will not only understand the most common terms, but you'll also feel empowered to use this knowledge as a tool for advocacy. So grab yourself a notebook and maybe a cup of coffee, and let's unravel the language of special education together. So first of all, why does it matter? Why do we need to understand all of this jargon? I mean, it's really just a bunch of fancy terminology to talk about how your kiddo's unique circumstances impact their education, right? But here's the thing. When you come to an IEP meeting, if you are not speaking the same language as the special education team at your child's schools, there's going to be a disconnect in what you guys are talking about. When we use special education terminology or jargon, it helps professionals to communicate precisely what the needs are, what services, laws, and processes. If we aren't able to speak the same language, the language of special education, then it can often feel overwhelming to really advocate for our kiddos. And that's where we're flipping the script today. So here are some of the big acronyms and terms that you will hear on your child's special education journey. You've probably heard them before. The first one, IEP, Individualized Education Plan. So the IEP is an actual document, okay? An actual document that outlines your child's learning goals, services, and accommodations. It is the roadmap for their education. It's the plan that's created by a team, including you, parents, and it is legally binding. You should be able to read your child's IEP and think that it's an accurate depiction of them. The next term is FAPE. You will hear this all the time. FAPE, Free and Appropriate Public Education. FAPE is the cornerstone for special education law. It ensures that every child with a disability has access to education tailored to fit their unique needs and circumstances at no cost to families. The next one is LRE, Least Restrictive Environment. Now, this refers to the idea that students with disabilities should be educated alongside their non-disabled peers as much as possible. The goal is inclusion while still meeting the child's individual needs. I think I'm going to do a whole other podcast episode on LRE because it's a really tricky subject. It's not as cut and dry as the law reads. which is why we have advocates and lawyers. It really comes down to the unique circumstances around the child. More on that another day. Okay, the next one is IDEA. This is the Mac Daddy. This is the law, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. It's the federal law that governs special education. This is the law that guarantees your child's rights to services, evaluations, and protections. Okay, so those are the 4 big acronyms. Now let's talk about terms related to evaluations and services. Grab your pencil because this is where things get a little bit technical. 504 plan. You might hear this term used alongside IEPs, but they're different. A 504 plan provides accommodations to help a child access their education, but here's the key difference. It does not include specialized instruction. It's covered under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. It's governed by a different section of the law and of the government than IDEA. MTSS stands for Multi-Tiered Systems of Supports. This is a framework schools can use to provide interventions for students. And it includes 3 tiers. Tier 1 being the classroom-wide supports that all individuals in the classroom, gen ed, special ed, everybody has access to these. Tier 2 is usually our intervention. And then tier 3 is our intensive individualized interventions, or RTI, response to intervention. RTI is part of that MTSS framework, and it really focuses on academic supports. RTI, response to intervention, is used to help identify students who may need special education services. Again, RTI is it's going to be its own podcast episode. It is also kind of a beast of a term. Functional Behavior Assessments, or FBAs. So this is an evaluation that is used to understand why a child exhibits certain behaviors. We use functional behavior assessments in conjunction with other assessments to address the behaviors in a positive way. Sometimes we use functional behavior assessments to develop behavior intervention plans, BIP. Okay, the next one is speech and language pathologist, occupational therapist, and physical therapist. So these are professionals who provide related services, specialized related services that are outlined in IEPs. A speech and language pathologist typically works on communication skills. An occupational therapist, or OT, works on motor skills and sensory needs. A physical therapist works on gross motor and movement ambulatory needs. So, another important part of the jargon and acronyms that you need to know are some of the legal and procedural terms that can be really confusing for parents if you don't understand what they are and how they're meant to be used. The first one is prior written notice, or PWN. I love prior written notice. If a school proposes or refuses to make a change to your child's education, they must provide you with a prior written notice explaining their decision. Okay, we talk all the time. I say it all the time. We want a paper trail. We want a paper trail. Get it in writing. If it's not in writing, guys, it did not happen. So a PWN makes a paper trail about what the district is proposing or refusing. If you are requesting that your child have a one-on-one to support their behavioral needs at school and the district says no, they need to put it in a prior written notice. Prior written notices say what they're wanting to do or not wanting to do and why. The why is really important, and that's the big reason we want a PWN. The next one is due process. This is the legal procedure that parents are entitled to that allows parents to resolve disputes with the school. It's litigation. It is a formal way to advocate for your child's rights when you and the school can't agree. Manifestation determination meetings or manifestation determination reviews, MD is usually how you'll see them, is a meeting. It's a specific type of meeting held if a child who has an IEP or a 504 plan is facing disciplinary action. Typically, it's if disciplinary action like suspension or expulsion is going to be more than 10 days, 10 school days in that school year. And the purpose of an MD meeting is to determine three things. One, if the behavior that is resulting in discipline is related to their disability. The next question is if the school district has upheld the IEP or 504, and if the team feels that the IEP or 504 needs to be changed or updated in order to support the child at school. That's the purpose of an MD meeting. Transition services are services designed to help students prepare for life after high school, whatever that looks like for them. College, employment, independent living. Transition services start when a child is still in high school and plans for their life after high school. Okay, there's so many more parts of special education language that we could go into that we're not going to today. Maybe I will do a follow-up episode another time with more of the language. If you have specific questions, send me a message and I'll make sure and get them answered for you. How do we apply this knowledge? Here are a few key strategies that will help you confidently navigate conversations and feel empowered to have these discussions in your child's IEP meeting. Here's the biggest one. And a lot of parents really struggle with this, and I understand. But ask for clarification. If you don't understand a term, it's okay to ask. A lot of professionals who have been in the special education business for a long time are fluent in this jargon and alphabet soup. And they forget how confusing it can be in the beginning. So ask for help. It's okay to request clarification. In fact, it shows that you are engaged and invested and that you are actually doing your due diligence in understanding the document. Take notes. If you don't feel comfortable asking during the meeting, write down the term and look it up later. Once you understand the terms, use them. Instead of saying something like, I think my child needs help in reading, you could discuss how RTI could help your child's decoding and fluency. Sometimes it's just too overwhelming, and that's okay. Having somebody come to meetings with you to take notes or ask questions can make a huge difference. Whether it's an advocate or a friend, parents are allowed to invite anybody that they deem appropriate to the meeting. So before we wrap up, here are a few tools to help you keep learning and growing this vocabulary. Start a list of definitions and terms that you encounter that you have questions about. When we practice using this language more, we become more fluent in it. Websites such as understood.org and Wright's Law are great for breaking down special education language. I also really love the definitions under the actual law of IDEA. Remember, it's one of our terms. If you just Google IDEA, definitions, it will take you to the actual law and list of definitions that are in there. Practice using the terms. The more you use these words in conversation, the more natural they will feel and the more fluent you will become. Understanding the language of special education is a really important tool when you're advocating for your kiddo. All right, my friends, that brings us to the end of today's episode. I hope that this dive into special education jargon has left you feeling more empowered and ready to tackle your next meeting.
Before we go, a quick legal disclaimer. I am a special education advocate, not an attorney. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guests and do not constitute legal or professional advice. If you have specific questions or concerns about your child's education, please see the transcripts for a link to schedule a complimentary consultation. Thanks for tuning in to this podcast of Bridging the Gap. If you found this conversation helpful, please subscribe to our podcast and leave a review. Join us next time as we continue to explore the latest insights and strategies in special education. Remember, together we can bridge the gap between families, schools, and communities to empower children with special needs.